Open up to Daniel chapter 6. How many of you read Daniel 6 in preparation for today? You know what? That number just keeps getting bigger and bigger. I just want to encourage you to read Daniel chapter 6 as we continue. Daniel chapter 7 next week. So here's a story for you. One stormy night, an elderly couple entered the lobby of a small hotel and asked for a room. The clerk said that they were all filled up, as were all the hotels in town. But I can't send a fine couple like you out in the rain, he said. Would you be willing to sleep in my room? The couple hesitated, but the clerk insisted. The next morning, when the man paid his bill, he said, "You're the kind of man who should be managing the best hotel in the United States. And someday, I'm going to build you one." The clerk smiled politely. And a few years later, the clerk received a letter from the elderly man recalling that stormy night and asked him to come up to New York. And a round-trip ticket was enclosed. When the clerk arrived, his host took him to the corner of 5th Avenue and 34th Street, where stood a magnificent new building. "That," explained the man, "is the hotel I have built for you to manage." That man was William Waldorf Astor, and the hotel was the original Waldorf Astoria. That young clerk, George C. Bolt, became its first manager. How faithful are you in the job that God has given you to do? Some of us tend to slack off after a while. You ever be at a job for a while and a few years later you're not quite as faithful, you don't show up on time as often, you aren't quite as faithful to the rules, you think you can bend things, and you just kind of get lax after a while. Sometimes I do at work. I know what the rules are, but I've been doing this for a long time. Do as I say, don't do as I do. You ever feel that way? You just kind of start to loosen up maybe a little bit. There's something about being faithful, though, in the long haul. Today we're in Daniel chapter 6. You know how old Daniel is by this time? Any ideas?
60.
He was 60 in chapter 5. By the time of Daniel chapter 6, more time has passed. He's probably closer to 80 years old by now. Do you think that over the course of his life, remember, when was Daniel taken into captivity? He was probably, 15 or so, we established in 605, towards more of the beginning of the Babylonian Empire. And he lived through Nebuchadnezzar, he lived through Nabonidus, he lived through all of these other kings of Babylon, Belshazzar. He saw the fall of the Babylonian Empire. Now we're into the Medo-Persian Empire. He's living through that. Do you think that Daniel has decreased in his level of faithfulness to God in this whole time? Because as we've been through 5 chapters now, he's been a stalwart. He's been very faithful. He's always the one that people look towards. When Belshazzar is wondering who can identify the handwriting on the wall, even after that king had long forgotten about a man named what? There's a guy named Daniel around here? Even after he was forgotten by the king, people still remembered him as being faithful, as the one who was close to God, as the one who had maintained his relationship with the Lord. He'd never faltered, and it doesn't seem like he ever failed. What is your life like if you were to measure up to Daniel in that sense? Have you ever had a period of time where it wasn't quite as awesome as it has been? Daniel serves as a really great example of faithfulness to us. He's probably closer to 80 years old by this point in Daniel chapter 6. And I'm sure you're all very familiar with Daniel chapter 6. What is Daniel 6 about? Does anybody remember? If you could sum it up in less than a sentence. Daniel and the lion's den. Maybe you've read this to your kids. You've probably read this. Even if you didn't read Daniel 6 in preparation for today, if I said we're doing Daniel and the lion's den, you'd go, "Oh, okay." On some level, it's tough to think about, if I'm going to preach through Daniel chapter 6, what am I going to tell you that's really going to knock your socks off, It's fun when you don't know about the handwriting on the wall. Maybe you don't know what that was saying. Maybe you don't know about this or that, and it's fun to give you something new. But what do you do when it's something this familiar? Even if you ask unbelievers, they might know about Daniel in the lion's den. But there was a conversation I had with Amy. Sometimes there's just something really special about just rereading even a familiar story. So even at least that's what we'll do today. But my prayer is that God is going to unlock for you something in your life about faithfulness that Daniel is going to exemplify here, that God could use in your life at some point. And today God wants you to see the faithfulness of Daniel. Today we're going to see the 3 results of faithfulness in the life of Daniel. As we study chapter 6, verses 1 through 9, when you're faithful, things happen. One result of Daniel being faithful is that others become resentful. I don't know if you've ever noticed that or not, but others will become resentful of you if you are that faithful. And we're going to see what happens in the life of Daniel as a result of his faithfulness. And the next thing we're going to see, the second result of the faithfulness in the life of Daniel, verses 10 through 17, is that you're going to become routine. If you're faithful, you will be routine. You might be wondering, well, what do you mean by that? What do you mean by routine? Well, if you read Daniel chapter 6, you would know exactly what I mean by that. That's why you got to read it. Daniel chapter 6. You're going to be routine. If you're faithful, you will be routine. And finally, the third result of the faithfulness in the life of Daniel, verses 18 through 28, if you're faithful, as Daniel was, God is revered. Not only by you, but by the other people that you impact in this life. Let me ask you this. Do you think that you have an impact in the hearts and lives of other people? Do you really believe that? You do. Whether you know it or not, whether you like it or not, unless you live in a bubble and you actually never leave your room, the second that you go out to Walmart, the second that you go out to a job, the second that you go out to mow your yard, no matter what you're doing in life, you do have an impact in the hearts and lives of other people. And your faithfulness is going to be a part of how you interact with those people. And if you're faithful, God will be revered. So let's start to look at this. Here's the context. Verse number 1. It pleased Darius to set over the kingdom 120 satraps to be over the whole kingdom. Okay, so here's what's going on. You remember last week, as we studied Daniel chapter 5, we saw the end of the Babylonian Empire. The handwriting on the wall was this: Belshazzar, your days are numbered. The kingdom's done. I'm taking it from you. And now we're going to have a new era. The Medes and the Persians are going to come, and they're going to be the dominant force in the land. Darius the Mede received the kingdom in verse 31 of chapter 5. And now Darius is going to set up this kingdom, and this is how he's going to do it. He's going to set over the whole kingdom 120 satraps. Think of satraps as maybe like governors. In our great nation, we have 50 of them. In the days of Darius, he set up 120. That's what he thought was best. And verse 2, and over these 3 governors, of whom Daniel was one, that the satraps might give account to them, so that the king would suffer no loss. So we have 120 down here. Those 120 would report to 3. And those 3 would report to Darius. Where did Daniel fit into this hierarchy within the government of the the Medo-Persian Empire? See, we've changed, and I have to change too. He was one of those 3. That's pretty good. Then, this Daniel distinguished himself above the governors and satraps because an excellent spirit was in him, and the king gave thought to setting him over the whole realm. Wow. Daniel's faithfulness. He was faithful in the life of the Babylonian Empire, doing all sorts of things, and we've been studying that for 5 weeks now. Think of all of the things that Daniel has been faithful with. And as Darius is now setting up his kingdom, he's thinking, wow, this Daniel has been really faithful. This Daniel has been doing an awesome job. He's so loyal. He's doing everything he's supposed to do. I wonder if I could even set him over my whole kingdom. Boy, that would be really cool. Wow, Daniel's been really faithful. But there's a problem. Have you ever had it in your life when you're faithful and you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, you're being loyal, you're being considerate, the Spirit of God is working in you to do what you need to do, God is setting you up for success or whatever it is, you know what ends up happening? Sometimes you get the wrong attention. Did you know that jealousy can creep in? People cannot like the fact that you're becoming successful. Daniel was considered to be the number one spot. How many people do you think wanted that job? And were not happy that this outsider, remember, even in Daniel chapter 5, they still considered Daniel to be an outsider. He wasn't a Babylonian. Remember, they accused him of, he wasn't a Babylonian. He was one of those Judeans who was brought from captivity. What is he doing here? Remember, that's how they thought of him even back then. And they're going to put this guy in charge of the whole kingdom? We can't have this. Verse 4, so the governors and the satraps sought to find some charge against Daniel concerning the kingdom. They wanted to find some way to bring some kind of charge against him. They didn't like the fact that he was going to be in charge of over them, even though he wasn't even a part of them. And they wouldn't stand for this. They didn't like it, so they tried to find some kind of charge against him. But they could find no charge, no fault, because he was faithful. Daniel was faithful. And what happens as a result of him being faithful? Well, not only does he get to be in a high position of authority because God had blessed him with that, but then there are also people who do not like the fact that as a result of your faithfulness that God is doing some unique things with you. And there are people that just don't like that. And these men said, we shall not find any charge against this Daniel unless we find it against him concerning the law of his God. So the governors and satraps thronged before the king and said thus to him, King Darius, live forever. So what did they do? They hatched a little scheme. They were so resentful of Daniel. They couldn't find a charge against him. They couldn't find something to present against him to get him thrown out of there. Have you ever known anybody that lost their job and they didn't even do anything wrong? It's just because somebody just simply didn't like them? I have a friend that I'm thinking of right now who lost his job. He got fired because at some other store, it was just somebody that just didn't like him. And they made up some charge against him about something stupid. And somebody was like, yeah, I guess he really needs to go. And they fired him. What? That still happens to this day. And here it is in Daniel chapter 6. People are doing the exact same thing. They wanted to trump up some sort of charge against him because they didn't like that he was successful. They didn't like that he had some authority or some position that they wanted. This jealousy was roused inside of them. They were so resentful of him as a result of his faithfulness that they decided to hatch this scheme. So they decided to go to King Darius and they boast him up. King Darius, live forever. You're so awesome. And Darius is probably like, yeah, well, all the governors and of the kingdom, the administrators, the satraps, the counselors, advisors, all of us have consulted together to establish a royal statute and to make a firm decree that whoever petitions any god or man for 30 days, except you, O king, shall be cast into the den of lions. So did you catch what their scheme was? Nobody gets to pray to any god or any person. Nobody. The only person that anybody in the kingdom can talk to or to reach out to is who? King Darius, and that's it. Interesting. Interesting that they went there. I bet that plays in later. They say, "Now, O king, establish the decree and sign the writing so that it cannot be changed according to the law of the Medes and Persians, which does not alter." And therefore King Darius signed the written decree. He probably wasn't even thinking about it. He probably got buttered up. You know when you want something and you go to your mom and dad and you're like, "Mom, you're just so pretty today. Can I get some ice cream?" "Yeah, sure. What? Sure." And all of a sudden they get out the ice cream and you're like, "What are you doing?" "Well, you said I could have some ice cream." "I did? Man." Got all buttered up, loosened up, and then you just get whatever you want real quick. And that's what they did to Darius. Darius probably wasn't even thinking about it. He probably enjoyed the fact that, yeah, they probably should be praying to me. They probably should be honoring me in this way. I am the king after all. And this law could not be changed. It was set in stone. And he signs it. Cool. What happens next? Now, verse 10. When Daniel knew that the writing was signed, he was all mad. He went to the king's palace and started to protest. He started a parade. He signed papers with the ACLU. He gathered all of his friends. He started a Facebook thing. Right? Is that what he did?
No.
Is that what we do? Yeah. What did Daniel do? As soon as he found out that the king made this decree, that nobody can pray to anybody other than the king, Daniel does what? He goes home. He goes home. Now when Daniel knew that the writing was signed, he went home. That's it. He goes home. Because he's so defeated, tired, and worn out. He's just so down on himself. He's so discouraged. He just goes home and cries in his pillow. Is that what he does? Is that what we do? We either make some big Facebook thing or we go home and cry in our pillow. Now, why? Do you think Daniel knew what they were doing? Do you think Daniel knew what those guys were doing when they made this decree for Darius to sign? Do you think Daniel knew what the jig was? I think he knew exactly what they were doing. I think he had full awareness of exactly what was going on. As a faithful man of God, the only reason that these guys made that decree is because they knew that Daniel was a routine kind of guy. They knew that every day Daniel did the exact same thing. You know what it was? Daniel prayed every day to God at the same time, at the same window, every single day. Those guys knew that. And so when Daniel found out what the decree was, Daniel's not dumb. He knew what they were trying to do. So you know what he does? He goes home, and in his upper room with his window open towards Jerusalem, he knelt down on his knees 3 times that day and prayed and gave thanks to God, as was his custom since early days. He's been doing this thing for a long time, guys. Do you think a decree of any king is going to stop him from praying to the King of Kings? No chance. This man, Daniel, was routine. He'd been praying like this for a long time. How long have you guys been praying? Well, a couple of years now, because a few years ago I had this happen to me and I kind of fell out of sorts with God for a while. You ever have one of those kinds of stories? Can you resonate with that a little bit? A faithful person of God is routine. You read your Bible every day, don't you? You want to maintain this fellowship with God. You go to church, you read your Bible, you pray, your routine. You and your God have a thing that you guys like to do together. You know, one of the things that really struck me with Jason doing the eulogy for Dennis yesterday, they had things that they liked to do together. That's what helped form their bond and make it so strong. What kind of bond do you have with God to make it be strong? Jason would go out fishing with Dennis. They take these trips. They had memories together. And you could see it in his words. You could see it in his emotions as Jason was talking about Dennis, that he legitimately actually cared about that man. And that Dennis cared for Jason. As you think about your relationship with the Lord, how routine is it? Or is God something that you just fit into your schedule when it's convenient for you? I suspect that many of us fit God into our schedule when it's convenient for us. And if I've got plans, I got plans, God. Sorry. I know I usually read my Bible in the morning, but I'm busy. I'm just too busy to read my Bible today. I got other stuff that's way more important than you. I know that you sent your son to die for me and all that. I mean, I'm just too busy. I just need to, whatever. A faithful man of God is routine in the way that he spends his time with his God, and that is what makes him faithful. He'd been doing this since early days. He had established a relationship with God and what he does with him, and he's not going to change it for anything. So many of us change our routine. We might pray for a little while and then decide we just don't want to do it anymore. Daniel was even willing to look in the face of the king and say, you know what, I'm not going to change what I'm doing no matter what you say. And so many of us will just change just because we want to. We'll stop praying, we'll stop doing this, we'll stop doing that. We haven't shared Jesus with anybody in months just because, I don't know. Daniel wasn't going to change, he was routine. Then these men assembled, verse 11, and found Daniel praying and making supplication before his God. Boy, weren't they excited? It worked! They're going to get him! And they went before the king and spoke concerning the king's decree. Have you not signed a decree that every man who petitions any other god or man within 30 days except you, O king, shall be cast into the den of lions? And the king answered and said, this thing is true, according to the law of the Medes and Persians, which does not alter. So they answered and said before the king, that Daniel, who is one of the captives of Judea, see, they didn't like him. He's somebody else. Does not show due regard for you, O king, or for the decree that you have signed, but makes his petition 3 times a day. And when the king, when he heard these words, was greatly displeased with himself and set his heart on Daniel to deliver him, and he labored till the going down of the sun to deliver him. How did Darius feel about the idea of sending Daniel into the den of lions? He was not excited about it. This wasn't what he wanted to do. How he didn't know that Daniel would pray to God, I'm not sure. How do you not... You want to set this guy over all of your kingdom, but you don't even know what he does with his life. Maybe that just goes to show just the kind of reputation that Daniel had. Even if he didn't know him personally, he still had such a tremendous reputation that he would want to set him over his entire kingdom. What a reputation Daniel had. I guess that just goes to show all the more what kind of faithfulness that Daniel had in his life. But nevertheless, Darius really liked Daniel. And he's pretty distraught that he made this petition, and now he's going to have to send Daniel to the lion's den because of that petition. Boy, it broke his heart. By the way, have you ever wondered why it's a den of lions? Before, if they wanted to get rid of people, you remember how they tried to get rid of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego? Do you remember how they tried to get rid of those boys? They tried to put them in the fiery furnace, and boy, that would take care of them. The Babylonians, that's what they did. The Medes and the Persians come along. They have a more reverence for fire. In their culture, their custom, they revered fire. They thought that dead bodies were kind of dirty, unclean. And you can't put an unclean thing into something that we revere so highly. You can't just burn bodies. I mean, you can't do that. But if you're going to have a bunch of dead people for some reason, how do you get rid of these bodies? I wish there'd be a way that we could get rid of dead bodies. I know. How about we let animals eat them? The animals will get rid of the dead bodies. They'll eat them and they'll be gone. What an ingenious solution. And so that's why there's a den of lions in the Medo-Persian Empire, because when they would kill people for whatever reason, this would be one of those reasons, they had a way to get rid of the body. Instead of just piling up dead bodies everywhere, the animals just ate them. And so they had a den of lions. And Darius understood that this is what was going to have to happen to Daniel, somebody that he really liked and cared for. And he was not happy. And he thought and thought and thought, how can I get around this? How am I going to be able to avoid this? I don't want Daniel in the lion's den. I don't want to see him killed. This is not good. What was I thinking? Verse 15. Then these men approached the king and said to the king, "Know, O king, that it is the law of the Medes and the Persians that no decree or statute which the king establishes may be changed." So the king gave the command, and they brought Daniel and cast him into the den of lions. But the king spoke, saying to Daniel, "Your God, whom you serve continually, he will deliver you." Then a stone was brought and laid at the mouth of the den, and the king sealed it with his own signet ring and with the signet of his lords, that the purpose concerning Daniel might not be changed. And if we stopped it there, what do you think would happen? Is Daniel going to be eaten? Is Daniel going to make friends with them? Is Daniel going to kill these lions like Luke Skywalker in the Rancor pit? Like, what's going to happen here? What's going to go on? So we've seen that if you're faithful, others will be resentful. You will be routine. But we will also see that God is revered. Something spectacular, miraculous is going to happen in that lion's den. And I think you know exactly what's going to happen. Daniel's going to survive. So let's read about that. Now the king went to his palace and spent the night fasting, and no musicians were brought before him. Also his sleep went from him. So how did the king feel about that night when Daniel spent the night in the lion's den? How did the king feel? He was beside himself. He couldn't sleep. He didn't want any musicians. He didn't want any distractions. He was fasting. He couldn't eat. He couldn't sleep. He was beside himself. Then the king arose very early in the morning, probably because he couldn't sleep. He just was tired of just laying there. He got up and in haste he went to the den of lions. And when he came to the den, he cried out with a lamenting voice to Daniel. And the king spoke, saying to Daniel, "Daniel, servant of the living God, is your God whom you serve continually able to deliver you from the lions?" And he's waiting with bated breath to hear the answer, if he's going to hear anything at all. And in verse 21, Daniel says to the king, "O king, live forever." Is Daniel mad at King Darius for throwing him in the lion's den? He's not mad at him. There's no reason to be mad at him. Because who is in control ultimately of all of these things, no matter what's going on in life? Who is in control? God is the man behind the curtain. This entire time, have you caught the idea that God has been in control of this situation from the beginning? God is the one who set Darius to be in charge of this land. God is the one who appointed Daniel to be one of these appointed satraps. God is the one who allowed Daniel to be so faithful. God is the one who did all of this stuff. God has been in control of this entire situation from the beginning. And Daniel, as a faithful man of God, knows this. And he knows that since God is in control, God is able to deliver him from that den of lions, no matter if Darius was being evil, no matter if Darius was being mean, no matter if Darius was just following orders, no matter what's going on, God is in control. And it tells us that no matter what's going on, is there ever a reason to be mad at anybody about anything? No. God is in control of even the most minutest of details that happens in your life, and nothing catches him by surprise. God knew exactly what was going to happen when Daniel was put into that den of lions. And Daniel trusted God. So of course Daniel wasn't mad at him. How many of us get mad when somebody does something to us? They cut us off in traffic. We want to just start honking the horn and going ballistic on them. And maybe somebody in Walmart cuts in front of you. Maybe something happens and you just fly off the handle because your rights were violated, or who knows what's going on. And we get all bent out of shape about so many different things. Is there ever really a reason to get bent out of shape about stuff? Maybe if you lose in a game or something, maybe then. You had one trick left and you get all mad now. No, I'm kidding. There's never a reason to be really mad at anybody about anything. God is in control of everything that's going on. Daniel knew that. Daniel, as a faithful man of God, was not mad at the king, even though the king threw him into the den. Daniel did not know that Darius had spent all night wondering, worrying, concerned, couldn't sleep. Daniel didn't know that. Verse 22, my God sent his angel and shut the lions' mouths so that they have not hurt me, because I was found innocent before him. And also, O king, I have done no wrong before you. What is he saying? Darius, you know that I've not done anything wrong. And more importantly, God knows that I have not done anything wrong. Now the king was exceedingly glad for him and commanded that they should take Daniel up out of the den. So Daniel was taken up out of the den, and no injury whatsoever was found on him, because he believed in his God. He was faithful in spite of something really bad happening to him. He was thrown into the den of lions. This is what they do with criminals and stuff. I mean, you just don't get thrown into the lion's den because you have too much hair or something. You get thrown into the lion's den because you need to die. Daniel was rescued out of that. And the king gave the command, and they brought in those men who had accused Daniel. And what happened to those guys? They cast those guys into the den of lions. Talk about full circle. And they cast them into the den of lions. Them, their children, their wives, and the lions overpowered them and broke all their bones into pieces before they ever came to the bottom of the den. Not only was it those guys that were thrown into the lion's den, it was their whole families. Darius was furious. We're going to have complete retribution here. We're not messing around. And then King Darius wrote the following. To all peoples, nations, and languages that dwell on the earth, peace be multiplied to you. Boy, that sounds like something you'd read out of the New Testament, doesn't it? As you read the epistles from Paul, doesn't that sound kind of like something that Paul would say? I make a decree. Now, this is Darius, by the way. He's not a Jew. He's not a believer as far as near as we can tell. I mean, did you see anything in here that would convince you that he was a believer? I don't know. But this is what he says. I make a decree that in every dominion of my kingdom, men must tremble and fear before the God of Daniel. You know what happens when you're faithful? God can redeem even the worst of situations that you're in, so that ultimately, no matter what happens to you, his name is the name that is glorified and revered. The key, the trick, you've got to be faithful. You've got to be faithful. Like Daniel has been faithful. For he is the living God and steadfast forever. His kingdom is the one which shall not be destroyed, and his dominion shall endure to the end. He delivers and rescues, and he works signs and wonders in heaven and on earth, who has delivered Daniel from the power of the lions. Darius, even though he's not a Jew, even though he was not brought up with any of these things, recognizes and understands the legitimate nature and power of God and his ability to redeem and rescue his people. Sometimes I wonder, even if us as believers truly understand and comprehend and give due credit to those ideas. Do we truly appreciate the idea that God is able to redeem and to rescue people? Or do we just write people off sometimes? Oh, God could never work in their life. They're way too old. God could never redeem them. God could never forgive them. And sometimes we wonder about that about ourselves. You don't know what I've done. God could never use me. God could never forgive me. God would never deliver me out of a lion's den. You don't know what I've done with my life. I'm way too far gone. God could never forgive me. You ever feel that way? You ever feel like what you've done just put you way outside the bounds of what God is able to do? And I want to tell you today that God can use even the worst, the most hardened, the worst of the worst sinners. That is exactly who God wants to save and to redeem. Because when those people are redeemed, you know what the rest of us have to conclude? There's only one explanation for why that person is serving God. It's because God did something to him. When somebody who's a really good guy, somebody that has his act together, decides that God is great, it's easy to conclude that they're just doing it because maybe they heard it from somewhere, or maybe they're just trying out a new fad or something like that. I saw something on Facebook this week about a guy who'd been on drugs, had been arrested several times, and he had his mug shots. And then there was a picture of him with what I'm assuming is his wife. And he looked clean and he looked great. And he had this big long post about how he had been in drugs and what that was like. And now his life as a result of accepting Jesus has been totally transformed. You know what you have to conclude when you read a story like that? God did something to that guy. God is the only one that could have done anything in the heart and life of that guy. There's no other conclusions. As a result of being faithful to God, he is revered by whoever sees your story. God is the one who's going to be glorified and revered. And do you want that for God? Do you want God to be honored and glorified with your life? That as people look at you, no matter where you're at, do you want God to be honored and glorified in your life? Because let me tell you something. You have a circle of influence. There are people that know you. There are people that see you, whether you're out mowing your yard, whether you're in line at Walmart, no matter what you're doing at your workplace, your neighbors, people see you, people know you, people have seen you. Do you want God to be honored and glorified in your life so that everybody else will know exactly who you serve? Now, there might be people who become resentful of you in that time. But even Jesus says, if you want to serve me, you're going to be persecuted just like me. But that's how you know you're on the right track. It takes being routine. You got to have a consistent fellowship, a consistent time with the Lord where you're going to give him time. You're going to carve time out for him. You don't carve time out if you happen to have it. God comes first. Even Jesus says, seek ye first the kingdom of God, and everything else will be given to you. And in the end, as you're being faithful, God is revered. So this Daniel prospered in the reign of Darius and in the reign of Cyrus the Persian. And that's where we end most of the time of Daniel. And as we start chapter 7 next week, it's going to bring in a whole new ball game for us of things to study and to look at in the life of Daniel. And I would encourage you to read Daniel 7 for next week. Let's pray.